On the way to the bus stop, Bill saw somebody he recognized walking towards him, but he couldn't remember his name. He began to think of things to say when they'd be close enough to acknowledge each other. As they drew nearer, their eyes locked, uncertain if the other was going to stop to talk. The person greeted Bill, as Bill mixed up the phrases, "What's up?" with "How's it going?" Confused, the person blurted out, "Thanks," before he knew what he was saying. Words caught in Bill's throat, and he replied, "Way." They did a sort of awkward half-turn, and then...
This is Bill. Bill is the protagonist of Don Hertzfeldt's 2012 film, It's Such a Beautiful Day. It's a really weird movie. In the beginning of the film, we're led to believe that Bill's life is entirely unremarkable. At the supermarket, he has superficial interactions with the other shoppers and the employees. Waiting for the bus, he watches garbage blowing in the wind. He maintains a legitimately friendly relationship with his ex-girlfriend. They still hang out sometimes. From the outside looking in, Bill is a normal dude. Having said that, Bill certainly has his quirks. In the supermarket, Bill was always very careful to only select fruit from the back of the produce piles, as the fruit at the front was crotch level to the other customers. When he dies, he doesn't want to be cremated because he read that the intense heat of the cremation process boils the fluids in the skull until the head explodes. He wants his remains to be fired into space instead. Or, if that's prohibitively expensive, at least his head. The film starts to hint at the idea that something is wrong with Bill. He visits the clinic, where he's given a booklet discussing potential memory loss in his treatment. He talks with his neighbor about the possibility of having his brain cryogenically preserved until medical science reaches the point where microscopic robots can be used to repair it. The film soon stops hinting and starts demonstrating. Bill begins to have trouble reading and even understanding speech. On another trip to the clinic, a guy at the bus stop has the head of a cow. His doctor shares discouraging news. His latest test results rule out further surgery, and his current treatment doesn't seem to be making any progress. It's Such a Beautiful Day is far from the only piece of media that explores the ways in which an unhealthy brain modulates the way that one perceives reality. Another work that explores the idea is Final Fantasy VII, as well as all of its derived media. I'm extremely impressed with the first entry in the Remake trilogy. Fun fact, Wedge is voiced by Matt Jones.
Come on, nobody do something this crazy just for money.
Nice.
That ain't me, man. I was the guy who was selling meth, allegedly.
Cloud has been upgraded from angsty badass to angsty badass in HD, but he's otherwise still the same Cloud that we've always known. His backstory is covered mostly in the original game. Cloud was raised in the village of Nibelheim. He left to join Soldier, an elite paramilitary force operated by the Shinra Power Electric Company. In Soldier, Cloud befriended quintessential gaming villain and edgelord icon Sephiroth. The two were eventually dispatched to a Mako reactor near Nibelheim to investigate monster sightings. In the course of their investigation, Sephiroth and Cloud discovered tanks containing Machanoids, vaguely humanoid monsters created by submerging actual humans in Mako, the liquid that flows through Gaia's lifestream, giving the planet life. Sephiroth flew into a frenzy, enraged by what their discovery implied about his own origins as a Shinra soldier fighter. Sephiroth did not want to be a monster. After the discovery, Sephiroth made his way to the abandoned Shinra research facility. He went days without eating or sleeping, pouring through endless piles of research, hoping to find the truth. He learned that he was created using cells from an extinct race of superhumans. He set Nibelheim ablaze before returning to the reactor. Cloud pursued Sephiroth, confronting him at the reactor. He recalls raising his sword and then nothing. He has no recollection of the battle, but he remembers those prior events. Now, Cloud fights alongside Avalanche, an eco-terrorist group that aims to stop Shinra from exhausting the lifestream and destroying the planet. The thing is, the events in Nibelheim, the so-called Nibelheim incident, didn't actually happen. At least, not the way that Cloud remembers. When the party encounters Sephiroth late in the original game, he reveals the truth. Cloud learns that his recollection of events is mostly correct, with one major exception. He wasn't really there. In Sephiroth's projection, the role that Cloud remembers himself filling is actually filled by a black-haired man. The black-haired man is Zack Fair, an actual Shinra soldier, first class, and, as it turns out, Cloud's best friend. Cloud's stories from Nibelheim happened, but they happened to Zack. Cloud was there for much of it, having been sent by Shinra to accompany Zack and Sephiroth, but his memories of the event aren't actually his. It was Zack who investigated the reactor. It was Zack who entered Genova's chamber, and it was Zack who confronted Sephiroth. Cloud arrived after the confrontation. With Zack too wounded to continue fighting, Cloud wielded Zack's sword. It's here that the timelines for the original and the remake diverge. In the original game, Zack and Cloud, weakened by their showdown with Sephiroth, were taken captive by Shinra and subjected to years of experimentation. Zack managed to escape, freeing Cloud in the process, and the two went on the run. Pursuing Zack and Cloud, the Shinra army set up an ambush. Zack took them on alone, and despite his tremendous power, the sheer number of Shinra troops wore him down. Mortally wounded and accepting his fate, Zack gifted his sword to Cloud before succumbing to his injuries. Cloud could not handle Zack's death. Watching his hometown burn to the ground, being experimented on by Shinra, losing his best friend, Cloud reached his limit. He merged Zack's identity into his own. As far as Cloud knew, Zack Fair never even existed. The remake took a very different turn. The most striking difference being, Zack didn't die. The uneasy style of It's Such a Beautiful Day is perfectly congruent to the uncertain, uncomfortable feeling of the film. The characters, the scenery, the inanimate objects, everything is restless, even when standing still. No thing and no one has an absolute form, and this plays well with Bill's loosening grip on reality. This isn't the only work for which Hertzfeldt utilized this style. Notably, he did the couch gag for the first episode of the 26th season of The Simpsons. There's very little that I can say about this couch gag that Jacob Geller hasn't already said in a more interesting and eloquent fashion, so I'll link that video in the description. I only want to recognize that Hertzfeldt used the same style for a piece that's arguably even weirder than It's Such a Beautiful Day. He also used this style in his 3-part series of short films, World of Tomorrow. Stop me if you've heard this one, it's really weird. It's a sci-fi story about clones, time travel, and memory. Whose memories belong to whom? Which memories are worth preserving? Who are you, and what does that imply? This style of animation is unsettling. Form is constantly in flux, and change appears discrete rather than continuous. Watch the animated portions of the music video for Take On Me on mute. Without the music as a tone indicator, it's prime Uncanny Valley content. It doesn't feel right. In Hertzfeldt's work, that seems to be the point. Bill's condition only worsens. A hospitalized Bill stops recognizing pictures of his loved ones, with the exception of his ex-girlfriend. He still can't remember her name. Bill is discharged to be taken care of at home, where he might be more comfortable. Bill struggles to understand and remember the things that the doctor tells him, but he does understand when the doctor tells him that he doesn't have very long to live. He visits a park, where he lays down and closes his eyes. The narrator begs him not to die.
Wait a minute. He's not gonna die.
He's not gonna die.
But he
here.
doesn't die.
No.
Bill, get up. Get up, Bill. Get up. He can't.
No,
He's not gonna die.
He can't ever die.
Bill. Bill.
Bill will spend hundreds of years traveling the world, learning all there is to know, reading every book and knowing every land. He will spend thousands of years creating art. He will father hundreds of thousands of children, outliving all of them, and every other human, and the Earth's next sapient inhabitants, and the Earth and the Sun. Until time loses all meaning and he forgets his name, Bill lives.
He lives and he lives until all of the lights go out.
Tranquility Lane is surreal. This is a world devoid of color, with the ominous ambient music of the rest of the game replaced by a whimsical, light-hearted track. The setting is now a 1960s television-style American neighborhood. The player is directed to speak with Betty, a young girl on the playground. There is more to Betty than her appearance implies. She seems to be the only resident that knows that they're inside of Vault 112. She's not willing to indulge any of the information you seek in regards to finding your father. She only wants to play games. The player has no choice but to comply. The games are perverse, tearing Tranquility Lane apart at the seams. Make Timmy cry, end a happy marriage, cold-blooded murder. Betty is the judge and jury, you are the executioner. Winning the first game, the truth is revealed. Betty is only an avatar for the simulation's creator, Dr. Stanislaus Braun. For each game won, Dr. Braun will provide the answer to any question the player asks. To ask more questions, the player has to win more games. With each game won, a tiny sliver of truth behind Tranquility Lane is revealed. Vault residents were led to believe that they would live perfect lives, suspended in a virtual world. Once inside, the Vault's residents became toys for Dr. Braun. A sadistic cycle began: torment, eradicate, wipe memories, and reset the simulation. That the player finds Betty in a playground is symbolic. Finally, Dr. Braun offers the player one final task, completion of which will grant the player anything they desire. Simply eliminate the town's residents. Dr. Braun makes good on his promise. After massacring the residents of Tranquility Lane and asking for a way out, a door materializes in the playground. On the other side is the real world. The other residents live in the real world too, seated in their Tranquility Loungers. The thing is, to them, Tranquility Lane is real. They don't realize that they're inside of a simulation. When Point Blank asked, "This is what, some kind of computer simulation?" George Nussbaum dismisses the question by accusing the player of reading too many comic books. Most of the other residents are equally quick to brush off the idea. Nick Bostrom, a philosopher at the University of Oxford, formulated the simulation hypothesis. Many works of science fiction, as well as some forecasts by serious technologists and futurologists, predict that enormous amounts of computing power will be available in the future. Let us suppose for a moment that these predictions are correct. One thing that later generations might do with their super powerful computers is run detailed simulations of their forebears or of people like their forebears. Because their computers would be so powerful, they could run a great many such simulations. Suppose that these simulated people are conscious, as they would be if the simulations were sufficiently fine-grained and if a certain quite widely accepted position in the philosophy of mind is correct. Then it could be the case that the vast majority of minds like ours do not belong to the original race, but rather to people being simulated by the advanced descendants of an original race. It is then possible to argue that, if this were the case, we would be rational to think that we are likely among the simulated minds rather than among the original biological ones. Therefore, if we don't think that we are currently living in a computer simulation, we are not entitled to believe that we will have descendants who will run lots of such simulations of their forebears. Put simply, Bostrom argues that because computers will one day be powerful enough to simulate the human consciousness, it could be the case that the vast majority of human consciousness to ever exist will be simulated. And if that were the case, then more likely than not, we are simulated consciousnesses. If you don't believe that we're living in a simulation, then it would be inconsistent to also believe that computers will ever be able to simulate consciousness. As Bostrom references, the idea that computers will one day be able to simulate human consciousness is widely accepted by philosophy of mind academics.
A lot of this isn't going to make sense to you, and I'm sorry about that. I'm just going to start at the beginning, with the house.
I first played What Remains of Edith Finch while I was mourning the death of my cat. I knew that the game was about death and legacy, so I thought it might help. It didn't. It didn't make things worse, but it wasn't really what I needed. Anyways, I should have played this game years sooner. It's wild. Earlier, I mentioned that before Fallout 3, I had never really considered the fact that games could be funny. Fallout 3 changed what I thought games could be. What Remains of Edith Finch did that over and over and over. I could tell within the first 60 seconds from the way that the narrator's captions were woven into the environment that nothing about this experience would be typical. For those who are unfamiliar, here's a description of What Remains of Edith Finch from the game's website. What Remains of Edith Finch is a collection of strange tales about a family in Washington state. As Edith, you'll explore the colossal Finch house, searching for stories as she explores her family history and tries to figure out why she's the last one in her family left alive. Each story you find lets you experience the life of a new family member on the day of their death, with stories ranging from the distant past to the present day. The gameplay and tone of the stories are as varied as the Finches themselves. The only constants are that each is played from a first-person perspective and that each story ends with that family member's death. Ultimately, it's a game about what it feels like to be humbled and astonished by the vast and unknowable world around us. Each death is demonstrated with a unique gameplay sequence: transforming into a cat and hunting a bird, documenting a hunting trip through photographs, investigating a break-in in the form of a comic book. Each sequence is carefully crafted to provide insight into who the family member was. It's an excellent form of storytelling, with each sequence able to stand alone on its own merits, but much like Tranquility Lane in Fallout 3, one sequence here stands head and shoulders above the rest.
Dear Mrs. Finch, as Lewis's psychiatrist, I can understand your desire for an explanation. As I see it, the trouble began in January, shortly after we convinced your son to seek treatment for substance abuse.
Lewis Finch was Edith Finch's older brother. She loved him deeply, that much is clear. While investigating Lewis's bedroom, Edith finds a letter from his psychiatrist. The player takes control of Lewis, working in the cannery. Slide the salmon under the fish guillotine, push it onto the conveyor belt, repeat. All the while, the psychiatrist narrates the contents of the letter. She explains that, as a means of coping with his mental illness, Lewis began constructing imaginary worlds inside of his head. It started with a labyrinth. An overlay of the maze appears, with the player now simultaneously controlling Lewis's work and his imaginary form in the maze. The labyrinth evolves into a 3D isometric dungeon. The player soon finds themselves in a city of Lewis's own design, fully fleshed out with buildings, individual citizens, and a unique culture. Lewis was unsatisfied with leading just one city. He boarded a ship and began to conquer other cities, bringing them under his rule. He became so enveloped in the world that he created that one day, he forgot to leave work. Even after his mother came to the cannery to beg him to come home, Lewis refused to leave the world that he created. Arriving in the port of a great city, Lewis disembarks from his ship. The game is now played from a traditional third-person perspective. Lewis knows that this world isn't real, but he doesn't care. He likes it better here. He's something greater than a king. The player's experience reflects Lewis's. Controlling both real and imaginary Lewis, the juxtaposition represents Lewis's position between realities. Lewis realizes that the real Lewis isn't the one chopping fish. It's the one climbing the steps of the Golden Palace. My imagination is as real as my body, he claims. On the other side of the door is the real-world cannery. It's dark and grimy. The player is no longer in charge of Lewis's cannery duties. At the end of the hall is a set of doors leading to the processing floor. There is only one person on the floor, Lewis. At this point, he has forgotten the real world. He lives full-time in the lands of wonder, where he is being crowned king. Ascending the conveyor belt, the player arrives at Lewis's coronation. There is no longer a cannery, only Lewis preparing to take the throne. Crowds have gathered to celebrate. At the top of the stairs is Lewis's royal spouse, preparing to place the crown on his head. This is the reality that Lewis chooses to reside in. This is reality for Lewis. In his reality, there is only one step left for him to become king. He merely needs to kneel down and present his head.
And the rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
Is Cobb stuck in a dream? That's the question posed in the final scene of Inception. If the top falls, he's in the real world. If it spins endlessly, he's in a dream. We don't get a resolution. Does the top fall? Does it matter? Clearly, it does matter. The top is his only way to determine definitively whether he's awake. Perception isn't enough. René Descartes spent a lot of time thinking about the relationship between perception and reality. His Meditations on First Philosophy popularized what is now known as the dream argument. The idea that the act of dreaming proves that the senses that we trust to perceive reality cannot be fully trusted. Whatever I have accepted until now as most true has come to me through my senses. But occasionally, I have found that they have deceived me, and it is unwise to trust completely those who have deceived us even once. According to the dream argument, any belief that is dependent on our senses should, at the very least, be rigorously scrutinized. This is closely related to the modern brain in a vat thought experiment. Suppose your brain is removed from your body, suspended in a vat of life-sustaining liquid, and connected to a computer that sends electrical impulses identical to those that the brain normally receives. The disembodied brain would continue to have perfectly normal conscious experiences, but those experiences would have no relationship with the objects and events of the real world. From the perspective of the brain, it is impossible to tell whether or not it is in a vat. If you can't know that you aren't a brain in a vat, then you can't know whether any of your beliefs about reality are true. Is this a simulation? Is it a dream? Does it matter?